All right, folks, we are back. So here we go. So basically, as you see on the screen, we're going to be just discussing common issues I have seen when judging cars and truck builds at model contests. I tried to think as many as I could. Again, some of it gets to be blurry after a long period of time. So, I'm sure there's more of these things. If I happen to think of more, I will certainly bring them forward at a future episode. But let's just run right down. And some things are just general. Most of this I'm going to be discussing. You won't see pictures, but we do have some pictures here, 3 or 4 pictures. So anyway, let's get right to it. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode 2, was the more you have on display, the more that can help your build or hurt your build when it is being judged, right? So if you did a lot of extra work and you did a great job and it's really clean, really neat, you hit all the basics, that can really help you. Basically, it's not the first thing we look at, but scope of work does enter the picture at some point with certain level of build, especially as you're looking at somebody winning a first place possibly, or going into the best of the category award, right? So as we said before, a convertible car obviously has a lot exposed versus a hardtop or a non-convertible car, right? So you can see a lot more. Just 2 cars against each other. One has an open engine cover, the other one has a closed engine cover. So again, clearly you can see more and judge more. And again, it could either help or hurt you depending on how well it is done. Just the sheer fact that you put extra details does not win the day, so to speak. Same with the rear trunk cover. Again, is it closed or open? Can we see something in there? How well was it done? I will tell you a common item that we see with front engine covers especially is it doesn't even have to be completely off. It could be just tilted up, is we can see underneath, and a lot of times people ignore the injector pin marks, right? They just don't address those and they just paint it, and that's it. Or sometimes we see where they don't, or they barely paint the underneath, if at all. So that's really unfinished. And if you have a super killer engine under there, again, using the famous word that we've been using a lot and that judges use all the time is consistency, right? So if you're able to super detail wire and all that, an engine, you should have easily been able to at least paint the underside of the front engine cover, bonnet, as some of you would say, and address the injector pin marks as well. Now, also, again, we've said this in a couple different ways, but we'll just spell it out as best we can, which is lots of detail doesn't always win the day. It doesn't matter. It only matters if it is done well and consistent. And really, I think that's the biggest disparity between what the average model contestant who's never judged doesn't see or hear, and also just the casual participant who doesn't necessarily enter the show, but they look around and they say, oh, why did that win? That other one had so much more stuff, or this or that. Well, they didn't see all the flaws, right? Yeah, they added all kinds of extra stuff, but it wasn't done very well, right? There was a lot of issues with it. So again, it hurt that builder in that particular case. Or again, it could help them greatly. Again, scope of work will enter the picture if you have kind of 2 models that are kind of dead even with each other, with issues or flaws, and then scope of work. If someone put a little more effort in, then they're going to get a little more credit, and that would put them ahead of the other guy. Now, a common issue we see, especially with the cars, not so much with trucks, but with cars, is that the cars are 3-wheeling, right? They are not balanced on the table or whatever surface it is on all 4 wheels. There's a very easy way to kind of test that. I usually have with me a little slip of paper, and if I could slide my slip of paper underneath one of the wheels, obviously that wheel is not touching the table, right? It's 3-wheeling. So that's something we do see. Polish kind of residue left in the door panel lines or in other areas that have panel lines on the rear trunk or front hood or whatever. Sometimes people polish the model to a T, but you see sporadic polish left in the grooves in the panel lines. So simply, that could be very easily corrected. Obviously, you just take a toothpick and a cloth and you can just get that right out of there. But we have seen that, and that when there's a deadlock of two great builds, sometimes that might be a differentiator in whether you win or not. Chrome parts, that seen quite a few issues there. Mold lines on chrome parts because people don't want to scrape the chrome. They didn't want to de-chrome and repaint. So they basically just leave the mold line alone. If you do address the mold line, we have seen issues with chrome where, you see the bare spot of plastic where the chrome was when they cut off the tree, off the sprue, right? Or again, if you sanded something or took your X-Acto blade and shaved something or mold line and you didn't put back the chrome, then, that we have seen issues like that for sure. If you can, use a Molotow pen is a great way to get that back. That's what I use to get the chrome back on there if you don't want to de-chrome and paint with full chrome. Or Prismacolor chrome pen. Prismacolor also makes them. Or just a shiny silver bottle of paint. That usually works pretty well too. Just don't put it on too thick and try to blend it in as best you can. Bare metal foil, we do see issues with that. Some people are masters with it. Some people have issues. It's wrinkled or not even, or the cut is not up to the molding. It's a little uneven. Again, there's some issues we see. If you painted chrome trim, we sometimes see inconsistency with chrome trim, or any trim for that matter. If you have a black trim outline in the windshield on the front or rear or both, if that's hand painted, sometimes we see some inconsistencies and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to show you something else with convertibles here. Let's get to some pictures, guys. I just keep rambling on. So as you see here is a convertible. Again, we can see well into this interior. Something we see not only just with convertibles, you can see this also with hardtop cars, is if it has an interior tub. A lot of times we'll see that this gap here is either too much or not consistent from side to side, or we see sometimes that this has got some glue issues maybe a little bit, or not painted well. But that is something to be aware of, again, not just with convertibles, but also with hard tops, is the interior tub where it meets the body. Make sure that's nice and, kind of, I guess you could say flush here. And also you're consistent at the very least. But if there's a huge gap here and there's a huge gap there, well, then we're gonna ding that for being a major construction flaw. But again, yeah, watch out for that. So what else do we have here? We have big rigs. There's a good one for big rig builds. Sometimes tires get to be a problem. Not only the tires themselves, the double tires, which we'll see there in a second, but if you have something like this, or even something like this, that the tires are mounted evenly, right? So the space between here and here and the overall fender here should match, right? Also, the tires shouldn't be rubbing against any fender on any car or vehicle. A lot of times on open wheel race cars or race cars overall, we see that the wheel or tire, I should say not the wheel, but the tire is rubbing or pushed right against it. So that's not very realistic. Again, so you have lots of exposure here. Like this could easily have been, this is too far back, this is too far forward, whatever it is. Make sure the spacing between these tires are nice and even. Also, looking at it from a different way, this here, right? So the spacing in here, make sure that's nice and even. Lots of times, big rig builds, these are kind of wobbly looking. They're not very even. Maybe there might be unpainted exposed rim or wheel in there that you can see. So make sure that's all addressed. Again, and make sure it's also not only even on one side, but consistent across, right? No doubt, right? So again, in this kind of example, right? This truck here, make sure these are nice and even. This tire up here lines up nicely with this tire here, and this tire here lines up nicely with that tire. And then, of course, going across, they all kind of line up nice and neat. Another thing that sometimes big rig builds have issues with is the mud flaps. Again, really, if they're slightly moved one way or the other, that's not a big deal. But the biggest issue would be consistency. So if this is bent a little bit this way and that's bent a little bit the other way, then consistency isn't there. So yeah, we try to look for consistency. That doesn't get up too much. You not only can get a view of it this way, but of course, looking from this angle, are they even this way as you're looking at it on the back, right? Like this way, or was one a little set back, or is one crooked, right? So we look for some kind of alignment there. And of course, up here would be another area right here too, right? So there you go, right? Now, obviously with big rigs, lots of people ignore this seam line and sadly, most model kits of big rigs have that dividing line. So a seam line down your fuel tank is obviously a no-no. That is not realistic. It does not belong there. So certainly, you would need to remove that. That's considered basic construction. Okay. So with pictures, I think we're basically done with pictures. I think I have just a couple more notes here. Oh yeah, I know what we're going to look at. Race cars. So the back, basically wing on a race car is definitely a concern, and that's one of the first things I do when looking at race cars. And we're going to move the camera here just to show you what I'm talking about with one of my own models. What do you know? I'm going to use one of my own models. Excuse the mess, folks. But here's a 1/43 scale Heller C9 Mercedes that I built. Now, it's okay build. It's not the greatest in the world. I did it years and years ago, probably 2004. And so what we're talking about here is the first thing I'll look at with the back wing is the wing basically setting nice and straight this way, right? Or is it this way or that way, right? But not only that, because some may get that part right, also this way. Is it straight this way, or is it bent that way or this way, right? Or wherever it be, right? So that's something to definitely be aware of. You'd be surprised how often we see amazing builds of race cars, Le Mans or whatever it be, or even cars in general, right? I mean, it doesn't even have to be a race car, but I've seen them a lot on race cars, these kinds of cars. Is, a spectacular build, exposed engine, all kinds of things, really nice. And then they have a pretty bad wing issue, right, where it's crooked. So again, that could be a difference between a winner and a second place or a third place and nothing, if the other people, did a little better. So, okay, finally, rusty, crusty versus shiny and spotless. Well, generally speaking, rusty and crusty shouldn't have any kind of shine to it whatsoever on the body or the areas. And shiny, same way, right? Most of the time shouldn't have any kind of dull finish on it whatsoever. So, it basically, those are just the overall rule or general thing that I've seen. Now, lastly, I'm just going to say that, we see a lot of advanced builds and, we do see quite a bit overall, I guess, is people who've rushed through the basics, rushed through some of the things I talked about, just to get to the good stuff, right? And have fun. And that's what it's about having fun. I don't fault anyone at all for having fun. I do the same exact thing. But the basics are important when we're judging IPMS rules. And that's one of the main things they emphasize, because you will have a much better model, cleaner model, if you address the basics as you're building. So that's it, folks. That's the end of episode 3. There will be an episode 4. We're going to get into kind of like volunteering to judge, going to the judges meeting, what they discuss at the judges meeting, generally speaking, how you get teams assembled, what you do as your team goes to your category to judge, how do you split up the team, how do you do all that stuff, and what typically happens we're going to share in episode 4. All right, cheers.